Special good afternoon to one and all. You've been having Mr. BUTE, Arthur BUTE, who has been in the seat from 9 o'clock this morning. And now it's time for us to, well, he stepped out, so it's time for us to have another candidate in the seat by the name of Patrice Gumbs. And Patrice Gumbs, I want to say good afternoon to you and welcome to the studios of 98.1 Pearl FM. How are you, Patrice?
You started?
Yes, we are. We are ready. Okay. And how are you?
Welcome. I'm pretty good, thank you. Final stretch of this campaign trail and feeling good about it, and just, calling everybody out to come Thursday and, give Party for Progress the opportunity to serve you, the people of St. Martin. Yep.
Okay, well, just had to fix that. Anyway, but Patrice, give us a rundown on who you are and your position on the slate and what we can expect.
Yeah. So again, my name is Patrice Gumbs. I'm candidate number 3 on the Party for Progress. I grew up here in St. Martin. Went to St. Dominic High School, continued high school education in the UK, received international baccalaureate diploma, went on to study in Paris in South Africa, and I have a bachelor's in international and comparative politics, and then I have a master's from the University of Leeds in global development and political economy international resources. Currently, I am the senior policy advisor at the Department of Foreign Relations for the government of St. Martin. And in that position, I basically represent St. Martin's national interests abroad. I report on everything from human rights to regional and Caribbean issues to UN issues. So that actually allows me to have a pretty much a bird's eye view of how government works. How a government works in relation to the rest of the world, and also gives me a wealth of knowledge about how we work in the context of international relations in other countries around the world. So it's a pretty lucky position to be in as a first-time job as a young St. Martiner. And what I bring to the party, having that knowledge, is basically a bird's eye view of how things generally should work. You have a wealth of knowledge of how the whole government apparatus works, and you work very closely with ministers in implementing what their foreign policies or initiatives are. So overall, you do get a very lucky position to understand how government functions.
Interesting. That's for a young entrepreneur. Well, I must say entrepreneur because it's that's vast. How did you actually manage to get channeled into what you just stated? And matter of fact, you said you studied in South Africa?
Yeah, so so basically one of my passions growing up was always politics. I always loved politics. I wouldn't necessarily say I came from a political family, but I do. My great aunt, the late Aline Henson, was very active in politics in the days of Felix Schwazi. She was the president for a time on the front side. There's a lot of politics I've been around. My great-grandfather, Gumbs, was deputy mayor way back when. His father as well. So it's a very political family in terms of knowledge and knowing what went on. And I think it just happened naturally because in the end of the day, it was not necessarily that we were groomed to go into politics, but it was always a passion of mine listening to conversations you would have. So when I actually decided what I wanted to study, it was always to go into politics and study politics. And then when I finished my diploma, I actually was interested in coming back home first to work in government here. And I was told, this is a opportunity, send in your CV, let's see where you fit in. And went through the whole process and the screening process for the job. And yeah, I was lucky enough to get it.
Yeah. You mentioned foreign affairs, and that's what you're doing now at the present moment.
Yes.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the foreign affairs, because normally you don't actually hear about what you are doing in the present moment.
Yeah.
And it's just so important for the youth and for not only the youth, but even the average man in St. Martin to understand that Yes, we do have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there are local young, ambitious St. Martiners who are heading and also working in this particular field. Walk us through.
Yeah. So in reality, when you look at the government of St. Martin, there's divisions of kingdom competency and local government competency. So foreign affairs and defense remains a kingdom competency, but within the framework of being an autonomous country, there is the idea of foreign relations. So foreign affairs, the kingdom together sets the policies and the parameters of what you're allowed to do, and it is in consultation annually with all the three prime ministers of the three Caribbean countries. And within that space, you as a autonomous country can engage in foreign relations. So we as St. Martin can be members, associated members to CARICOM. We're working on that. We're members to different organizations regionally. We can actually represent the whole Kingdom of the Netherlands abroad at the UN and different organizations. We can actually enter into MOUs on our own with other countries or organizations. We work very closely with our embassies and consulates around the world, particularly when it comes to the US, because we are a big tourist destination. So we have a strong relationship with the consulate in Curacao. And overall, what it is that despite it being a kingdom competency, the implementation of foreign relations and human rights and the obligations to treaties falls on the government's responsibility. So though it's the kingdom basically safeguards and protects human rights aspects and other foreign relations affairs aspects, it's our responsibility to actually implement and put it forward. So the government actually plays a big role in ensuring that that's actually happening.
So the foreign affairs, you said, is being safeguarded for these islands, and that is being done by the Netherlands.
Yeah, so basically what it means is that we have, if you look from a point of view of human rights rights are safeguarded by the Kingdom of the Netherlands, so it falls under foreign affairs, human rights, safeguarded by the Kingdom of the Netherlands, but the implementation of it is actually the responsibility of the autonomous country. So for example, if we have to safeguard, if we have to, for example, provide adequate detention facilities in St. Martin, that's responsibility of the minister of St. Martin to ensure the prison is painted, there's proper drainage and plumbing, for example. And if that goes wrong, it falls on then the kingdom to then safeguard those issues, for example, make sure the whole kingdom is aligned. But the policies and how to make sure those, those terms of the treaty, for example, are protected, are executed, is down to the country. It's a very complicated thing, because I think overall, foreign affairs is something that you don't hear in the paper. It's sort of a facilitation department in terms of the whole entire government apparatus. But it's actually a key player in ensuring that St. Martin's national interests are protected. So everything from when a tourist comes in here to relations with the US to determining, for example, should we send a warning for tourists not to come to St. Martin, that all is channeled in cooperation with all different ministries through the Department of Foreign Relations, to the consulates in the State Department. And, we work quite a lot with the outside world, more than the average St. Martin person on a day-to-day.
So the autonomous country itself should have its work done or cut out for them by they themselves. That's what you do, or how many of you actually?
Yeah, so it's quite a small department. Okay. It's actually 8 of us, and we have head of department is Kalila Peters.
Yes.
And then we have one treaty lawyer. We have a vacancy for that. That's actually being filled currently.
You said what? A what?
A treaty lawyer. So that's treaty the person lawyer. Who basically, a treaty lawyer basically is the person that vets all treaties relevant to St. Martin before signing. They also look at MOUs to make sure that MOUs don't actually have binding language in them. So it's not, because we ourselves cannot enter into a treaty, we can enter into MOU. Treaties, we can say we want to join, but we have to go through the whole kingdom process, because they actually are binding, they're binding. So if you break a treaty, you have potentially consequences for breaking a treaty. We have one policy advisor, myself, and then we have a secretary, we have a consular affairs officer, that's basically this person who liaises all the time with embassies in the event an incident happens with a national, and you have 2 protocol officers. The protocol officers basically are in charge of ensuring that ministers, when they travel, along with delegations, are facilitated, arranging courtesies, pickups, welcoming dignitaries, foreign governments to the country when they come in. That's the task of the protocol officers. And then we have one person additional, the strategic policy advisor, who comes in from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in The Hague and but sort of liaise between the ministry and our department, that we're all sort of in sync together.
So the policy advisor, that's you. So if I want to know anything about the policies, that's you're the one that they have to speak to.
Yes, myself and my head of department, Kalila, we both
Yes.
sort of share policy, the policy domain.
Okay. Now, if you want to work with CARICOM, because you said, we do have an understanding with CARICOM as an advisor,
The former Nas Antilles was an observer to CARICOM.
Correct. And where do we stand now?
So right now, after 10-10-10, that relationship hasn't been formalized, but we're working on that currently in the department to become an associate member, because until we're independent, we cannot be a full member of CARICOM.
Until you are until we are independent.
Independent.
Okay.
You cannot be a full member of CARICOM, only associated. Right now, that then means that you're not allowed into certain areas of CARICOM. So the foreign affairs aspect of CARICOM, you won't be allowed to be in, because then technically that's not your competency in the full legal sense. Even though we are allowed to engage in foreign relations, we cannot sit in debates or drive foreign affairs policy of CARICOM, for example. Yeah.
And the movement of people within the CARICOM.
Yeah. So again, one of those things is that we have to remember that when it comes to nationality and visas, that's actually responsibility of the kingdom. So when we as St. Martin want to decide who needs a visa to come into St. Martin, that's actually a discussion we have every year within the kingdom, the visa conference, which then sits down and discusses all the countries of the world and debates together, okay, do we see, for example, country X might have a problem, so let's implement a visa for them. And it's a consultative thing between all 4 kingdom partners on who needs a visa to enter any of the kingdom areas. It can differ, of course, because, for example, in Curacao, Jamaicans don't need a visa to come to Curacao, but they need one for St. Martin. So it's just a question of how your economy is made, the experience of with those nationalities. It can be adjusted per kingdom partner. And with question of free movement, a lot of CARICOM nationals, well, not a lot, just a few, actually need a visa to come to St. Martin. And it's a discussion ongoing on basically how will you look at the issue of free movement, but free movement in of itself is only for and applicable to full CARICOM members. So we don't have to necessarily fall into that parameter of allowing free movement, because we're not full members of CARICOM. That's actually a CARICOM privilege, so to speak.
So if and when, because I know this is politics time, it's election time.
Yes.
But if there is, let's say, if you have to go independence, then St. Martin would be the one who determines who and how. Do you see St. Martin being able to walk in that particular line at that moment?
Yeah. I think when it comes to the independence question, it's sort of something that's coming up. Well, it has come up during this election campaign season. And one of the things I definitely agree with is that, independence is a natural progression of a people. The question becomes, what does it mean as a natural progression? Because in reality, what we've seen is that we have a status now that we have not fully made use of as yet, in a lot of different aspects. Particularly when it comes to foreign affairs, for example, foreign relations, understanding how the world works, how we fit into this world. I mean, right after Hurricane Irma, there was talks about, okay, let's leave the Dutch money and get Plan B money. As a non-independent country, you don't get money from anybody else in the world except your so-called mother country. That's not a term I like to particularly use, but there's not many options for money. And if you are independent, the money you get is not 550 million euros. It's a couple 300,000 there, $1 million there. So the idea of thinking that we as a non-independent country in our current status, you don't know the parameters that you can that are given to you. So that's the first part. The second part is, we keep talking about we need to do a referendum for independence. If we look back at what we did in 2000 for the 10-10-10 status we now have, a lot of the things we went and rushed to change, we changed because we had to become a country. It wasn't a natural progression. We said, okay, we don't have these laws in place, we don't have this in place, we don't have that in place, let's rush now and put it into place in time for a country. What's happened now is that in that rush of 10 years, we found out we copy-pasted a lot of things were not properly done, and we're now seeing it now. For example, CFT. We rushed, agreed to CFT, we rushed, agreed to the Article 59, we rushed and agreed to a snap election without a context for it. And now what we're seeing is that, these actually don't make sense, or, they're being forced on us, but we actually agree to all of these things. So my whole take on independence is, until you start having governments that invest in people, particularly education and health, you don't want to rush independence and start creating and investing in those things for the sake of becoming independent. To build a nation, you have to invest in people. So until we, for example, figure out what language we're going to speak, invest in education, address the issues of foundation-based education, ensure that we actually have financially sustainable healthcare system and SZV and a viable pension system. I don't see independence as being necessarily the goal, but I think a sound financial system, a strong nation of people, that leads to a natural route of independence, not a referendum to then start doing those things for the sake of being a country, an independent country.
Okay, so yes, a referendum, yes, independence, but for sure, education towards this path. That's what you're saying.
No,
and also
no, that's not what I said.
Investment.
I said the referendum, no, because the referendum to me comes with people who understand what they're actually voting for.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, okay.
The referendum, yes, we can have that, and independence, yes, you can have that too. But you have to invest into your people before you get to those particular points.
Yeah, and I think like for example, right now we're having an election, and people are asking me, we're running for the minister for prime minister. I was like, no, we're running to be parliamentarian.
Yes.
So there are people right now who live here who don't understand the system we have. And it's because, time and time again, investments have not been made in education. And that means for us as a Party for Progress, it's academic, it's life, and it's basically knowledge of our system, knowing what the context within which we live, and also a lot of common sense, and that ties into vocational skills as well. A lot of that has been missing from what we've seen government after government. And for us as Party for Progress, you have to invest in building up people before you can say, okay, let's now become sovereign and independent of anything else.
When I listen to you, many things come to mind with the questions that I have also have been asking. You understand how government work?
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah, basically.
Basically and professionally. So do you think that the present apparatus, the way that it is being worked out, or it's been working, the way the wheels turn, is there some way that they have to be re-railed?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things with government is that, in the private sector, the goal is profit. Whereas in government, the goal is, or it should be, accountability. So processes tend to be much longer in government than in the private sector. That then means that, and I can say this with much confidence, is that a lot of times you end up spending more in government for the sake of accountability. There needs to be a marriage between accountability and, not profit per se, because there is no profit in government, but in terms of accountability and efficiency, let's put it this way. Streamlining processes. one of the key things that we actually want to focus on as a party is streamlining the way government functions. Right now, for example, a lot of what happens in government is let's say you put in a letter to the minister, which let's say comes in June, which actually was the case. I sent in a letter to the minister in June in my capacity as the chair of the Monument Council, giving basically a property owner the right to remodel and post Hurricane Irma the home. To this date, that letter hasn't gotten to the minister because it goes manually from the depot desk to the back at div. It goes to the department, sorted out to whoever is working on it. It goes to the minister. And these are all physical copies that go one at a time. So unless you know the minister or have access to a minister, your document ends up in a pile of documents that has to move manually from desk to desk to desk. In government right now, the average wait time for each person in the system is allowed to have a document thing for 2 months. You know, and these are the things, because in the end of the day, yes, you want to be accountable and give everybody time to review documents, but what does it mean in terms of efficiency? What does it mean in terms of government receiving revenue? What does it mean in terms of customer service and actually building a robust and resilient economy? If it takes this long for something to be approved or to go through, it hinders a lot of, for example, investment opportunities, people's permits, you know, and for us, it's about streamlining those processes in government. Secondly, I think right now in government, a lot of departments have different systems they work with. Mm-hmm. That has to be streamlined, because I cannot be making a document with one system and then the other system you have a different number of the same exact document. I think a lot of times you see and it's actually public knowledge that, you know, the receiver's office and the tax office has two separate systems that they work with. So you can have two different crib numbers. Until you sort those things out yourself manually, mm-hmm. You're operating in two crib numbers. So, you know, these things are how you have to, it's what you have to address and fix to actually make a strong and robust government, because this is all sort of bureaucracy that basically hinders progress and efficiency and getting the people's work done.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back in order to go mm-hmm. forward. Do you think that these are things of the past that was done the way it was done, and now it's time to be re-railed?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the messages we as a party are trying to bring forward, is that, you know, we've gotten very far with certain approaches. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you want to go further than where you are, mm-hmm. you have to look at fresh approaches to new problems. Mm-hmm. You know, when St. Martin government, when we had, for example, 10-10-10, we actually didn't have we had a department called FBB, which is the financial oversight department within the Island Council. Mm-hmm. Now we're a country. We've added that every ministry has financial controllers. Mm-hmm. So the financial controllers are a new layer. And instead of restructuring or retweaking what the financial FBB used to do, we just add another layer on top of it. So we just keep adding instead of actually addressing and fixing new approaches for a new way of doing government. You know, government has gotten much bigger. We have completely new departments that didn't exist before 10-10-10. They were in Curacao. And it's a question now of saying to yourself, okay, this worked for Island Territory. The way how we process documents work for Island Territory. The way how we process travel for Island Territory. The way how we, you know, operated in governing and campaigning and how we address the public work as Island Territory. Mm-hmm. But for a burgeoning new autonomous country, we have to change how we do government. We have to change how we do politics. We have to change and realize that, you know, only through slow incremental change, because at the end of the day, you don't want to come in, you know, blazing open doors, but we have to work towards addressing the things that need to be changed with new and fresh approaches.
Interesting. So now with this happening, with what you just explained me, and with the questions that coming from the media point of view, asking these questions over and over to those in control and command, is government overextended?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the size of government in numbers?
Yes.
Yeah. I think,
Is it overlapping too much that it's that it's slowing the whole wheel turning?
Yeah, I think, and this is the thing you have a lot, is that a lot of the policy departments are in need of manpower. I mean, in for example, Curacao, a lot of the conceptualization of what it meant to become a country was like, okay, the whole Netherlands Antilles needed 10 policy advisors in foreign relations. We're only dealing with St. Martin now, so we might only just need 2. But that conceptualization doesn't work, because in the end of the day, it's still the same amount of work that has to be done, despite the size of the country. So you still have to work with the UN, with human rights committees, with embassies, with consulates. The size of your country does not determine how necessarily big your critical apparatus is. So I think when it comes to critical apparatus with policies and particularly legal affairs and that aspect of government is definitely understaffed. Attention has to be given to that. And I think attention has to be given as well to the way how the government is structured. A lot of the, what you call organizational structure is missing a lot of people that are necessary. A lot of people are in positions that they don't actually perform because there's no legal framework for them within the copy-paste method that we did prior to 10-10-10. I think what you do have a lot in government are people who are very much trying their best in what they do. And oftentimes, I think, as a government worker, you do get a bad reputation of being, lazy or whatever. But in reality, there's a lot of work being done by civil servants that is underappreciated overall.
Yeah, it's not that you are saying that they are not performing, and not that we are saying that they are not performing. Yes, they are performing.
Yes.
So please, out there, don't get the idea that's what we are talking about. We are talking about
the size of the
exactly. Yeah. You getting paid and I getting paid and Mr. BUTE getting paid for the same job when it's only you supposed to be getting paid for this this particular job.
Yeah, and I think what it boils down to is that in reality, civil servants haven't even gotten their cost of living adjustment since I started to work in 2013. And we're working with more demands. We also have now to also include the idea of the working alongside the National Recovery Bureau for a large number of us. And the workload is piling up because as you become more and more into this autonomous country status, there's more parts that are being opened day after day. And the reality is critical vacancies are not being filled, particularly in the policy and legal positions because of the cost. So then you're just having a very well, I would say a big lack of critical capacity in government that is necessary, whereas you do have a lot more of maybe the MBO level than what you need in terms of maybe the have or VWO.
So it comes back to what you're saying, that it has to be dealt with.
I think, yeah.
So with that, I would need to turn you over to Mr. BUTE, but your manifesto.
Yes.
What's in that manifesto, though, that you can tell us about?
Yeah.
And not only that, but you mention also that government is a place where things can get done, but it's a new time. And it's a new day. Explain to us again, or some more, elaborate on it, on how this is going to be done.
Yeah. So just touching briefly on what we said prior is that, we launched this party basically, we launched this party back in September with the idea of entering into the next election, 2022. So we announced our launch on September 21st. Government fell September 23rd, 22nd. They called election 23rd, and we had scheduled to launch on the 27th. So we said to ourselves, okay, Well, we've been working on this for the past 7 years, in terms of working about what we stood for, what we wanted to see, speaking to different people in the community about what they want to see for St. Martin, the issues that were most important to everybody. And we started working on a manifesto and putting it together for some time now. Of course, I think that's why when the election was called how it was called, we were pretty much ready to go in terms of the concept of who we are as a party and pretty much the core members that you see today, because we were planning to launch, because we believe very strongly that you don't launch a political party for an election. A political party is supposed to stand outside of election, actually do something beyond just running elections, about education, pushing ideas and an ideology, seeing what has to be addressed, working on promoting how you as a party will address it for whenever the election comes about. So a lot of our manifesto was pretty much made up and earmarked, and I think it was so funny because when we did launch in the end, a lot of people believe that we launched knowing inside information of a government was going to fall, and we're tied to whoever people have been saying that we're tied to. I mean, it's interesting what you've been hearing, and I tell you all the time, if you have to sit down and listen to a lot of the rhetoric and whatever, we're not doing that. We're so focused because of how long we've been working on this that's just sort of sliding off of our shoulders. So our whole manifesto basically was written, and the term is improving the quality of life for all in St. Martin. And we actually are focusing on 5 key points and pillars, you want to call them, that we're going to use to address those things. So it's actually, the first one is education, health and sports, infrastructure, environment, and waste management. You have sound financial responsibility, and as well energy that makes sense. So from a personal point of view, I'm championing 5 things. Each of us have identified in the manifesto 5 things that we're actually personally championing. Mine is actually working towards a fair minimum or living wage, whatever you want to call it. The second one is actually ensuring that you have reliable alternative energy that's affordable as well. The third one is actually community, ensuring that community centers and communities actually get budgetary support to strengthen the relation between government and citizens, because right now you don't see government coming to the people until it's election time. You don't see government engaging in stakeholder-based policy writing at all. It's more consultative. If there's maybe like an ambassador or minister that comes, or a trade mission, the government takes them to SHTA, for example. But on a regular routine thing, what we've constantly heard, speaking to everybody in the community, is that government doesn't come and ask us our opinion on much. There's SARE plays that role in terms of being the council that deals with socioeconomic affairs, but in terms of parliamentarians coming to the people, which they should do because they represent you, going out there and speaking to people, that's very much lacking. The fourth one I'm actually looking at is, we talked about streamlining government policies to ensure that you bolster investment in business. And then the fifth one is actually strengthening small-scale urban agricultural initiatives on St. Martin.
Interesting. We're speaking to a dynamic Patrice Gumbs Jr., and I must bring in Mr. BUTE here, because I know he's relishing this, and he couldn't wait to get back in. Well, I'm going to give him the opportunity to actually do that and pass you over. But I'm looking forward to actually continuing to have some discussions with you after elections also.
Yes, thank you.
Gumbs. Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm back, radio listeners and viewers. I have here Mr. Patrice Gumbs, candidate number 3 of the Party for Progress. And as you know, you was listening to Mr. Gumbs already, giving you their party vision and party plans for if once they are elected. And I said it, once they are elected means that all of you who are looking for changes, then give the Party for Complex give them the vote to make the changes. Don't stay home, don't vote no blanks, but do what you think is best for St. Martin. And I believe personally that if I try this one, I try that one, I try this one, let me try a new one and see what they will be about. And if they are not, if they have not given you what they promise, you do just as you did with the one before. You vote for someone else, but give them the chance to go in and make the changes that they have asked to do. Mr. Patrice Gumbs, I've known you for years. Know your father for years. Know your mother for years. You know, so you come from very established and grounded family. And I, you know, during my years in the Chamber of Commerce and in the SER, and you know, I met you professionally. You know, I know what you stand for and what all, and I see you on a party like this because it works. You synchronize with the kind of person you are. You talked just now a lot about the strategies and vision and action, and and also of your professional, in your professional world as working as civil servant with Mr. Pearl. But I will go a little more, you know, you all are a group of young professionals. And I noticed that you all kept it like that. Young professional with the same vision, with the same strategy that will put your vision and your strategy together into action. Why not decided to take one or two old fellows with you?
Yeah, I think, you know, it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision to keep anybody, or veteran, out of the party. But I think for us, one of the challenges is that, you know, even not having a veteran on the party, people assume that we're backed by, you know, all the veterans.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for us, what it boils down to is that a lot of what we want to achieve is to make changes to St. Martin, which we saw with veteran politicians as being something unattainable. It's the same reason why we didn't actually join an existing political party, period. Because, you know, you can be a young, aspiring, and dynamic person, and you go on to a party which is rigid and set. It's not going to change. And we've seen it already. We've seen a lot of people go on to parties because they've had great ideas, and they're deep down, they're just being used by these parties for votes. You know, and it's just, okay, thanks for those, you know, that great speech in the campaign trail and for your votes. Now sit down and get to know what this is about, because this is how you're going to do it from now on. And for us, it's, personally speaking, as a party speaking, it's, you know, we take advice from everybody and across all party lines, because, you know, in the end of the day, not to say that every single person who's already in government before has nothing good to say, but you pick and choose what you think is best, and some negative things or things which are not necessarily fit your own agenda or your ideologies, you leave behind. And with that, you mesh to see, okay, these ideas that have come from across all lines, across even other party lines, for example, they're good ideas, and they can feed in and help us to create ideas which are now more progressive to move the country a bit more forward.
In your personal, I mean, apart from the party manifesto, you all give several points. Each candidate give their own point, and one of the things in that you personally is really focuses on is affordable, reliable, and efficient alternative energy for all. You know, a lot of us been singing this song
for a very long time.
And then you ask sometime, how is it possible that the population is singing a song? Certain aspect of the population is bringing studies forward and saying, listen, if you bring down the cost of energy in St. Martin, it will bring down the cost of doing business. It will automatically then create investment, because most businesses, if you do the studies that came out, said that the energy bill is one of the highest bill that a part of salaries, but energy bill is the highest bill that business have to operate, paying GB. So, and all government know about it, and then government for over the years don't do nothing about the situation, and then you read suddenly that even talking about these things, government suddenly go from A to B, and you hear, oh, GB just buying 2 new Wärtsilä diesel motors, and then you ask, where is that thought of affordable, reliable, an alternative energy, and for we to bring down the cost of things?
Yeah.
And you're saying it. Will you live up to these this thought? Not only thought. Will you put this thought in working?
Yeah, and I think whatever we put in our manifesto, in our 5 points that we're personally championing, that's because we personally are going to push and believe strongly in those points. One of the things with GB, for example, that they have a concession agreement with government, which states they have to have at least 2% renewable energy.
Yeah.
Clearly, the concession agreement is not being followed. It's a public document, so I'm not telling anybody anything that no one knows. The reality is, though, it is very difficult for a small country to move towards renewable energy. When you talk about economies of scale, the amount of money you have to invest in St. Martin to transform a whole economy is disproportionately high compared to some place like even like Puerto Rico, for example, or Guadeloupe, which gets subsidies, for example, from the EU for these things. But what you're seeing here now is that one of the things we're pushing as a party is that you have to seek partnerships to fill the gaps where government falls financially or capacity short. As a party, we believe overall that government is a facilitator. Government is not supposed to do everything. The government can't do everything. Particularly our government, it's relatively small and it's actually cash strapped. So one of the things actually in my capacity as working in foreign affairs is that we actually, one of my passions is energy politics. We've actually, during the time prior to the fall of the government, we actually invited a organization from New York who actually does a lot of looking at what, based on your economy, your infrastructure, what works best for your country. What you see time and time again, for example, is that we've thrown a lot of ideas of waste to energy. Waste to energy has proven in terms of dollars and cents as being financially not the best option for St. Martin. We don't produce enough.
Definitely.
If you bring in the French side as well, we still don't produce enough.
That's so, been proven.
Yeah, it's been proven. And looking then at the question of that company, in discussions with them, have told us, St. Martin has a lot of flat roofs, for example. Battery cells are an option for St. Martin to help move away from heavy crude. There's also the idea of solar panels. There's also the idea of, seeing how you can then change the concession agreement, for example, right now, that citizens are allowed to actually sell energy that they produce back into the grid. That's something that's not allowed right now, and that needs to be addressed, because the people who actually have their, their own insular production systems at their home, and if they overproduce, it just gets wasted. So the idea of addressing the concession agreement energy policy, basically, to allow those things to actually happen, that's how you actually move forward towards even allowing investments in cleaner energy to be possible. Because you're going to invest in something that your law or your agreements doesn't actually facilitate. So it's incrementally looking at the root problem and then building up from there. And it ties in as well to the whole second thing I'm championing of small-scale agriculture initiatives, because at the end of the day, you have a lot of flat roofs. You're not ever going to compete with China and the U.S. in food production.
No.
And, people like to throw that idea out of, agriculture. And I'm like, no, it would never be the whole plantation-style agriculture that we had.
You don't have the space, you don't have so much things.
We've moved away from that. But in terms of government facilitating, supporting, and finding regional, local, even international partners who can say, hey, you have a flat roof in this house, let's put half solar panels, the other half will be herbs and whatever. At home, for example, my parents do a lot of home gardening, and that's reduced a lot of the cost, for example, in terms of the bill you pay at the grocery store all the time.
No. Your phone, look at that.
So just one of those things of, if you're trying to build a strategically sustainable country and look at ways to basically not necessarily compete against the whole international food system.
Yeah.
But look at, for example, how you can mitigate the cost to the consumer.
You said something just very, very, that hit me when you said that the concession arrangement that the government have between government and GB, and these things are done quite a while ago. They said, so don't you think it's very important that not only with the concession between GB, these things that should be looked like every 2-3 years, and should be added to, and because circumstances have changed so dramatic in the world of today that you cannot leave things for 10 years and sleep down, or 5 to 10 years.
And when you look at the concession agreement, the renewable target was 2%. Most countries now, their renewable targets are at 15 to between 35.
Yes.
So that concession agreement needs to be brought more up to date.
Yeah.
But the reality is we've done so little in terms of moving towards renewable energy that actually 2% would actually be a realistic first point of the project.
Yes.
But it just goes to show you how far we are behind innovating towards renewable energy.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think, one of the things that as a party we constantly champion is that, we're not here to say that everybody in the past in government was bad, but we have to look at it now from a point of view that St. Martin does not exist in its own little bubble. What are we looking at as ourselves in terms of other countries, in terms of what the global trends are? How are we going to move the country forward? And, legislatively, we have to make those changes to then make sure that we can actually, at the ministerial level, put into place initiatives and projects and programs that bring us forward.
One point you also have, that you also have on your things that you will and I like it because it's my background. Sorry, with tax legislation and boosting of investment. Foreign investment depends a lot, and we mentioned just now on how cost effective it is to do business in a country. We look at what it costs to do business, labor, taxes, and all of those things. So, don't you think it's time now that we review those legislation to make St. Martin business attractive to foreign investment? Because we're saying about foreign investment, but to be honest with you, there's not much attraction to do business in Martin. We have a good tourism market for 6 months, but otherwise from that, our laws them and things them are, and when you invest or when you set up your NV, it takes so long before you get your license, and the whole now. So we have to put those things in place if we really want to create an atmosphere where people we go out there and just like we sell our island for tourism, we sell our island also to do investment. What will be your plan in that direction?
So when it comes to the whole tax system in St. Martin, we have one of the highest tax rates in the whole kingdom. It's everything from our profit tax rate of 34.5% to the additional 5% now of TOT, to then what is actually a scaled income tax rate that, after a very short amount, you get to the highest scale very quickly. 51%, I think, is the highest highest rate you can get. And one of the things you have to look at, too, is that beyond restructuring the tax system, one of the things actually within the tax system we want to address is actually reducing profit tax. Because the reality is government doesn't actually get that much money from profit tax. You can create all sort of legal frameworks that actually avoids you paying any profit tax at all legally. Where government gets the bulk of its money is TOT. So if you reduce that idea of this high profit tax and focus more on TOT, that's how you actually make it a little more attractive, because in essence with TOT and profit tax, you're doubly paying taxes for the same exact amount of money you're making in one given year or month, for example. to boot with that, when you look at it, for example, in terms of reducing income tax, the income tax is relatively high, and the question then is, can, for example, government source another form of revenue from a sin tax, for example? That's a question to have, because we actually make our whole economy work based on the fact that we're duty free.
Yeah.
One of the first things, actually, before you even look at what you want to reduce overall, is you have to increase compliance.
Yeah.
Because I tell everybody all the time, it sounds good to cut taxes as a campaign strategy, but right now we have 40-something% compliance.
Yeah, yeah.
So the global average was 75%. So
Yeah.
you have a 30% gap in St.
Yeah.
Martin of revenue that you could actually be using to bolster government's coffers. So before you actually even try to change what you already have, you need to address and fix the system with which you already work with.
But Mr. Gumbs, I mean, I was from 2006. I was member of the chamber. We had discussion with that time was not Parliament, commissioners of tourism and finance, talking about tax compliance. We now in 2020, 14 years after.
Yeah.
From 2011 to 2014, I was member of the SAD and chairman of the SAD. We wrote several reports about these things. And then you ask yourself, as a professional, as a person who was out there, you ask yourself, you hear politicians when they on the campaign trail,
Yeah.
and not particularly you guys or your party, because you just get in there now. So you but the existing parties that run for the last 10 years and 4 years, they have been saying these things all the time and have not done nothing about tax compliance.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I will go so far to say that the former minister of finance prefer to have an agreement with this company of and building a new tax office than working hard to move up this the tax compliance to about 75%. How important is this tax compliance issue to your party?
Yeah, it's actually extremely important because, again, we cannot want to change the tax system without actually addressing why the problem is. One of the biggest issues is compliance, basically. It's like we're actually a severely understaffed tax office. Tax agents and tax advisors in government work under a lot of tough conditions. And they're not given due credit a lot of times. There's a backlog. I actually received a return from 2015 or 14, I think, 2-3 months ago. Some people don't receive it until maybe 2021. And it boils down to the fact that it depends on who you have as a tax person that is going to be processed fast enough. And, is the idea of you have to put maybe online a system that you can say, okay, this is your tax thing. You're looking at it from a point of view of the method in which we file taxes is burdensome. We have a lot of deductions that we can take out. And one of the discussions we've actually had is maybe moving towards where you don't pay income tax, but you pay wage tax. Everybody who has a wage tax happens to get a pay slip. That's all the tax they pay, and it's reduced, for example, in the long-term idea, and then you don't have to bother about declaring anything again. Because at the end of the day, the issue with compliance is not only the question of not enough people at the tax office, but it's also a question of there's not necessarily there's two systems being worked with. I can't do insight into the receiver's office unless I'm asked at the tax office. So the two systems don't actually talk to each other. Then, of course, it's a lot of small things that have to be done. But as a party, for us, if you're looking to move a country forward, truth be told, the more complicated your tax system is, and the less compliance you have, you as a government don't have any money to invest. So we keep talking about making investments and everything like that, but until we actually increase compliance and have government money in our coffers, nothing is actually going to happen.
When you talk to foreign investors, and I have a good friend, big businesses, and he have big investment in St. Martin, villa and apartment. He have businesses in Dubai and in Dominica. Come to St. Martin is this place where you rest. So I always have these conversations. And one of the things that he said to me, your profit tax, keep it at 10%. Because he said to me, most of the time it costs you more than 10% to pay to your tax lawyers or hide your money. So if it's 10%, he said to me, why should I go in the dilemma of paying my tax lawyers so much money now to get rid of my profit?
Yeah.
So keep it good, 10%. And then he said, because that is affordable, something that any big businesses
Can afford to
pay and don't mind losing. And when he said it to me today, I read in the paper that Holland pursuing Barbados or put Barbados on the gray list or blacklist because they brought down their profits tax to 9%. And the EU and the Netherlands and all, anything under 9%, they consider you then
A tax haven.
a tax haven.
Yeah.
You understand? So he's telling me that a couple of weeks ago we had this conversation, and then today we read it that here the Netherlands put in Barbados, but because Barbados also the same idea we have, getting rid of the profit tax to make us more attractive, you know. But the problem is that you can also be put on a blacklist, and nobody wants to be blacklisted. No businessman wants to be blacklisted, or no country wants to be blacklisted, because once you're blacklisted, people are not doing business with you no more. They see you in a different eye light. Not only that, your chances of getting, and this one, Mr. Patrice know better than me, your chances of getting then Europe financing project in your country and all of those things here, you know, they consider all those things that when you you know, you don't live up to the rules of the game. And I said to you, and saying all of that, so we have to be very particular and cautious when we just get rid of profit tax, and put something in place that we know that it's acceptable for all parts. Because you said some just now that tax inspectors have so much work, and they're not much of them. And because of that, because I have a friend who's a tax lawyer, these guys make a lot of money advising their clients how to, you know, get around the tax office.
Yeah.
And they make a lot of money. These guys, they're it's between 500 and 1,000 guilders an hour. It's no joke. These guys make a lot of money. So it is very important for once and all we tackle this issue about tax compliance, changing our tax laws, what will fit us. These are discussion I think we should have. This is 2020. After the election, the new Minister of Finance, the new Minister of Economic Affairs, which will theater on them, we have to have a national conference about these issues for we to set up a plan 2020, 2030.
Yes.
I think it's very, very, very important, and for we to find the direction where we want to put this country, because nowadays, as your group of you are the guys who are going to take over this whole country in another 20 years. Another 10 to 20 years, you have completely control. And we, the older folks, should not stand in the way to prevent you guys to create a nuisance market.
Yeah, and I think overall, you know, what the Party for Progress is saying is that, you know, once again, piggybacking on what you said, Mr. Butte, is that there's the time now we're at a tipping point.
Yeah.
Where basically the old ways of doing things, they brought us this far.
Yeah.
But we now have to pass the baton on to new and fresh approaches.
Yes.
You know, and I tell you by again, you know, older politicians should play a more mentoring role
Exactly.
for young politicians. You know, and not in the sense that you indoctrinate the way how your party might think, but just in how to do things, from everything from negotiation, consultation, and cooperation. Because at the end of the day, a politician should embody those things: compromise, negotiation, and basically statesmanship and diplomacy.
Yeah.
You know, and what you end up seeing basically is a lot of times that people like to hold on to power. You know, I tell you about all the time, you know, as a party, we see ourselves as facilitators. That's what government is supposed to be. And we're coming in to make a couple of changes so that, you know, God forbid we drop down today. It's not about me having to be there. It's about the system that we push to create that helps everybody. Because right now, what you see right now is basically only when certain people are in, certain people benefit. And when that party is out, that whole 10 people, 50 people no longer are in the loop for anything.
Yeah.
The next set of people coming in now. And it's a question of, no, it has to be a system where everybody is included, opportunities are equitable, and it's not about me having to be there to push our country forward.
Mr. Gumbs, great having you for the hour. After this political event, as Mr. Pearl said, we have to have you when time, you know, permits.
Yes.
For we have a serious discussion on, you know, development and nation development and all of those kind of questions. So, say the final word, why the people should vote for Mr. Gumbs and the Party for Progress this Thursday from 8 o'clock, between 8 and 8 p.m.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Martin and listeners from the Facebook feed, which mine just died, to, of course, Pearl's Facebook feed and everyone on the radio as well, and Facebook and, you know, websites as well. Thank you again. So Martin, along this process, we've spoken to you, we've asked you, you know, what are your issues, what are your concerns, and you've time and time again have told us you're fed up. You're fed up with empty promises. You're fed up with this idea of a dependency on certain politicians. You're tired of basically, you know, everyone being completely self-interested. September, a new option was launched. Dynamic young people who have St. Martin at heart, who are vastly educated in an array of things which you need to push this country forward. We're very approachable. We've actually completely changed how campaigning is done in St. Martin. We've gone to people's homes. We've gone to small town hall meetings. We've engaged, we've listened. We've written our manifesto based on what you have told us your concerns are. And, you know, we've actually gone into the community and demonstrated already how we see government to be, facilitating you, the people. Last night, we actually launched our first initiative project, which was actually in consultation with the National Sports Institute. We actually partnered with them to get the lights back on in Simpson Bay Court. We're the only party who actually did it the proper way. We use existing foundations, organizations to actually improve what we needed in Simpson Bay. Yesterday as well, we partnered with Light for Life Foundation, bringing them persons who we knew could facilitate and assist people who needed help. And that's what government is. We presented 200 baskets to people in need. And it was not necessarily done by P.F.P, Party for Progress, but as government, you know, you have your contacts, you have to facilitate and bring people together. It's about partnerships. And that's what we're about. It's a whole new way of looking at how government should work. We come with a vast amount of knowledge. We're from a good background. We know how government works. We are looking at basically pulling everybody forward in St. Martin. It's not about ourselves. And come January 3rd, I'm saying 3rd because I'm number 3. Come January 9th, vote for Party for Progress. I'm candidate number 3, Patrice Gumbs. And like we've always said, you know, a vote for me or anybody else on the list is a vote for Party for Progress, is a vote for change, real change, and a sustainable future for St. Martin.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard Mr. Patrice Gumbs, and with that, we tell you thank you, and the end of our political interview for the day. We'll see you tomorrow, same time.